Hello students, welcome to La Excellence IAS Kalam program season 2 episode 30. This is a GS mains answer writing initiative. I am Kiranmai and we will be continuing this season for about 50 episodes. Let us look at today's question. The question says, what is WTO's principle of non-discrimination? Discuss in the context of India's recent steps to curb opportunistic takeovers of domestic companies. This question is from General Studies paper 2, from the topic of international relations and from the subtopic of WTO or international organizations. So this question is for 10 marks and it has to be written in 150 words. So it is asking about WTO's principle of non-discrimination and it is asking to discuss the context. So what is the context in which this question is being asked? You all must be aware that People's Bank of China, which is the central bank of China, raised its stake in India's mortgage provider HDFC. In this, the share has been raised from 0.8% to 1.01% by People's Bank of China. In a bid to protect the domestic companies, the central government has revised the FDI policy, foreign direct investment policy. What has happened was, because of COVID-19 lockdown, there was an economic disruption in India. The valuation of most firms has come down. As a result, there was an increasing threat from China that opportunistic takeovers may be possible, because of which central government came up with a new FDI policy which said that investments from China will now require a clearance from center. The wordings were different. It said all the investments from countries which have land boundary with India will now require a clearance from center. They will not be allowed under the automatic route. Also, a transfer of ownership of FDI will also require a government approval. So these both were the changes which were brought about by central government in the FDI policy so as to prevent the opportunistic takeovers of the devalued domestic companies by China. So it is in this context that the question has been asked. What are the value addition points you can write in this answer? Before coming to the value addition points, I think we should have a prerequisite of what are the World Trade Organization's 2 principles of non-discrimination. World Trade Organization has got 2 principles for non-discrimination. One is most favored nation, wherein a country is supposed to treat all other countries similarly. So it should not show difference between one country and other. For example, India is giving some privileges to USA. It has to extend the same privilege to all other countries of the world like Australia, China or any other country. So it is not supposed to show any difference in treatment between 2 countries in terms of trade as well as investment. This is the principle of non-discrimination or most favored nation. There is another principle in non-discrimination, that is national treatment, which means that whatever benefits or the rules the domestic entities have got, the same rules and benefits will be accruing to all other countries' entities also. That is what is meant by national treatment principle of non-discrimination. So these are 2 prerequisites which will be required to answer this question. Also, the context which we have already discussed, which will be a good value addition to the answer. Some other value addition could be the China's cumulative investment in India, which has become more than $8 billion. It has increased to a great extent in the recent times and it is now standing at more than $8 billion. That could be written. Otherwise, the pros and cons of foreign investments. For example, the greenfield projects will bring both money as well as generate employment in India. Okay, so that is a pro of foreign investment. And what will be the con? The con will be with respect to brownfield projects wherein opportunistic takeovers may happen. That is what India has feared for and brought in the changes in the FDI policy. So these could be some of the value addition points for this answer. Coming to what is to be avoided while writing this answer, I think you should avoid a detailed history of WTO, though you may write in brief in the introduction. Also, the subsidies, the green box subsidies, amber box subsidies, etc., which we often read in the newspapers, could be avoided. Try to avoid any political tone in our answer. You can write about the non-discrimination in trade and investments, but try to avoid the other hostilities which are existing between the two countries. So these are to be avoided while writing this answer. Coming to how to write the answer in the introduction, body and conclusion format. In the introduction, we can write about what is WTO and what is understandable by non-discrimination. We can explain in short with examples. Coming to the body part could consist of the context, that is what India's recent change in FDI means. And then you can write about how it will impact the firms as well as the investments, that is the consequences. China has already accused that India is breaching WTO's principle of non-discrimination. So all these can be discussed in the body part. Coming to the conclusion, we always have to endorse free and fair trade, and the importance of non-discrimination could be written in the conclusion, giving it an optimistic note. Now let us move to the sample answer discussion. So the person is writing, World Trade Organization WTO is the international agency that aims to promote free and fair, rule-based, competitive trade between the countries. Non-discrimination of WTO is based on two main principles. So he has described what is WTO and its mandate in one statement, and then he is writing about what is meant by non-discrimination. Okay, so what has he written? Non-discrimination. In that he has written most favored nation treatment obligation, national treatment obligation. We have already discussed what these are. Let us see what he writes. MFN treatment obligation prohibits a country from discriminating between two other countries. For example, if this is India, it cannot discriminate USA and Australia. Okay, in its treatment with respect to trade and investment, India cannot discriminate between USA and Australia and China. Okay, this is MFN obligation or most favored nation treatment obligation. What is national treatment obligation? He writes, prohibits discrimination against any other country. This is against any other country. What does it mean? For example, in India, if there is a company called X and in USA there is another company called Y, this obligation of national treatment calls that both X and Y should have a fair competition in India. Okay, so India should not give any undue advantage to its own companies. That is what is meant by national treatment obligation. It prohibits discrimination against any other country. What does he write next? Indian government recently decided to ban foreign direct investment through automatic route from neighboring countries that share a land boundary with India. Okay, so these are the wordings which Indian FDI policy in its revision has used. This is said to be aimed at Chinese investments which are trying to exploit the cheap valuations in depressed economic times post-lockdown to pick up shares in few companies. So here he is trying to describe the context in which the question is being asked. Okay, so first he has mentioned in the introduction about WTO and then about non-discrimination, what are the two principles, and then he is writing the context in which this question has been asked, explaining the context, what has happened, how valuations of some of the firms have decreased post lockdown, and how China is trying to take undue advantage of the situation. He then writes, Chinese have accused India of violation of WTO's principle of non-discrimination and free trade. So this is the context part. He is writing probable consequences of government's decision. He is writing it in two parts, economic and political. In the economic part, he is writing, Indian companies with Chinese investments may find difficulty in raising funds and face competition from firms funded by other countries. For example, there are some firms in India like Paytm, Ola and Big Basket, etc., which have got huge Chinese investments. In the time of decreasing value, they will need further investments. But as they have already got some Chinese investments, they would be looking forward for Chinese investments, and that would take a long time because government's approvals are needed. While at the same time, some other companies which are funded by other countries, for example USA, will be easily able to get the additional funds required, and hence these may suffer increasing competition from these companies. So that is what is meant by this point. He then writes, greenfield investments that bring capital and employment opportunities may also suffer. So all the while we have been discussing about the brownfield investments, that is only already established companies and firms are being invested, or the stake in these companies is being increased. But here the greenfield investments are also being affected because of this clause, which will bring both capital as well as employment opportunities. So that also is likely to suffer according to the person. He then writes political consequences, stating rising animosity with the neighboring countries. We had these clauses already existing with Pakistan and Bangladesh, but now there will be a rising animosity with the other countries also, like China, Nepal and Bhutan. An issue may also be taken to WTO by China. The embassy has already accused India. The issue may be taken to WTO. This person further writes, non-discrimination is the core principle of free and fair trade. India, while trying to protect the domestic companies from opportunistic takeovers, should be guided by this principle in her decisions, so as to provide a level playing field to all countries in their investments. So it is telling about the importance of principle of non-discrimination, and it has also tried to summarize what has happened. India is trying to protect its domestic companies from opportunistic takeovers, and then he is writing, it should be guided by this principle of non-discrimination to provide a level playing field to all countries in their investments. So this is a decent enough conclusion. If we analyze the entire answer, he has given a good introduction describing about WTO and the principle of non-discrimination. Then he told the context and what would be the possible consequences of this happening, and then he has given a decent introduction. It is overall a good answer. Let us all come to the end of the discussion. We have discussed about the issue in detail, the value addition points that could be written in this answer, the prerequisites required to answer this question, as well as what is to be avoided while writing this answer, and then we discussed a sample answer. Before ending our discussion, let me give you topic for today. Make a note about WTO and the various issues India is associated with in WTO. Make a short note of around 200 to 250 words. Keep it ready for your mains exam. Let us all meet again tomorrow. Thank you.